to do with this. Call the car audio enthusiasts, solving audio problems with the best. Got my system, beat the rest. 12-inch subs, dropping down the beat. 8,000 watts, bringing the heat. Big mids and highs, bringing the style. You can hear me coming for 20 miles.
All right, guys, today we're going to talk about how many batteries you need in your car audio setup. The subject is quite complex and there's not a lot of information available for this particular application of AGM batteries. So I've tried my best to put together a comprehensive summary, something that the average person can understand, and just how to explain where I'm getting my numbers and how this all works. First of all, we know that some of your AGM batteries have a cold cranking amp rating. Say it's 1100 cold cranking amps. We figure, well, we can pull 1100 amps from that battery. And yes, you can, but only for a short period of time. After that short period of time, say 10, 15 seconds, the battery normally goes into recovery state. So it's recovering the power that it just dumped. And this is why whenever you're playing a system and you've got your batteries freshly charged, that first initial 10, 15 seconds, you're getting thunderous amounts of power and the bass is hitting really hard, and then it starts to fall off really quick. It's not really an issue of how much power you're putting back into the battery at this point. It's just a matter of what that chemistry and that battery is designed to do. That particular part of that battery is designed to be able to provide power to a starter to start an engine, not to be able to provide 15 minutes of hardcore thundering bass. And so when we're considering how much discharge we can do on a AGM battery and also replacing that power, we have to look at more of its deep cycle properties. There are several things we need to consider. How much current can the battery provide constantly? How much current can the battery take constantly? And how will doing these things heat up the system and create inefficiencies and affect the overall performance of the system as a whole? Because as a battery is being discharged and recharged, it generates heat. That generates resistance, and the battery will resist always being charged by the alternator. So the alternator initially is going to be able to put power in the battery quite quickly, but as the battery starts to get closer to its top and also builds up heat, it's going to resist that power from the alternator. When it resists that power from the alternator is going to get hot. If you've opened your hood and touched your alternator and it burned your hand, that's why. It isn't that the alternator's having to work hard to do the job, it's that the alternator is fighting the chemistry of the cells it's trying to store energy into. So the objective in any system is to create less resistance for that alternator to be able to work with. If you have 10 batteries and you're only pulling 1,000 watts, that alternator is going to receive no resistance. Basically, putting power in those batteries will be easy. The batteries will be doing their job easy. Everything is a perfect world, except you're using 10 AGM batteries to power a 1,000-watt amplifier. So where does the medium come in? What is enough? You know, a typical AGM battery can comfortably discharge 10 amps constantly, or 100 amps. You would need as many as 10. But what will work in the car audio world? Well, understanding that this technology was never intended to be used the way we use it. So there's no real precedence for doing this. There's no real equation to use to solve this problem. And this is what everyone is searching for, is what's the magic equation to figure out how many batteries they need. So as car audio enthusiasts, we are breaking new ground in this market every day. We are creating a new precedence for how to structure a system to be able to handle thousands of amps of current moving through from one end of a vehicle to the other, how to fight the inefficiencies of that design. As a general rule, this is the question you guys are looking for. This is the answer you're searching for. I'm going to tell you my general rule. But understand that it is not a hard and fast rule. Based on my research, my experience, and also plenty of friends I have that run systems, what I have found that works is if you run a 100 amp hour battery for a 1,000 watt amplifier. If you've got half of the power that you're going to be consuming coming out of the alternator. So let me explain. Let me go into a little more detail on that. Let's say you have a 1,000 watt system. Based on my math, a 1,000 watt system requires 100 amps of power. So a 100 amp hour battery would be fine for that, but you need 50 amps of alternator current to cover that. Extra current. So if you're running a 160 amp alternator in your car is eating up 75% of that, you're going to be a little bit short on that current. Let's do a bigger system. Let's say you have a 10,000 watt system. This is a pretty good sized system these days. Still, there's some way bigger, but a 10,000 watt system would require about 1,000 amps of current to run full tilt, which would equal 10 AGM batteries, that 100 amp hours each, and a 500 amps of alternator. Does that make sense? Which if you've got a 10,000 watt system, that would be at least 500 amps. So say two 320 amp alternators to power that. And this is the math that I use for when I advise on this subject matter. Is it perfect? No, there's no perfect. I mean, the only applications for large batteries that are thoroughly researched and developed are, solar power and how to run a basic car, maybe a boat. These are things that have, but in car audio, things are just chaotic. The numbers that we're doing has happened so quickly. The technology's advanced so fast that the battery needs and the structure to create that kind of power just isn't there yet. Of course, if you're wanting to go with lithium, lithium is far more efficient at taking power and discharging power. So lithium is a better choice. But lithium has drawbacks. It doesn't perform well in the cold. In fact, if it's cold enough, it can literally catch on fire. I know this from personal experience. Guys, lithium is sketchy. If you're using lithium, be careful. Don't get it cold and don't overcharge it. Those two things will cause problems. However, if you're able to use lithium in a safe way and you are willing to accept the shortcomings and the potential dangers of it, it's very good for doing car audio thing because it can take a lot of power in very quickly and produce a lot of power very quickly. Something that AGM batteries just were never ever designed to do. Capacitors are even better because they can take in power even faster and kick it out even faster. So they don't get hot. They don't put a stress on the alternator because the alternator can feed them as much as it's not reading that resistance. And the resistance, of course, creates heat. Well, there's not going to be near as much resistance when it comes to capacitors. However, capacitors have a very small amount of storage. So they're not going to be able to handle as much of that big hits for as long as some deep cycle batteries. The best system, ultimately, would be a setup where you've got a good power and alternator feeding into some AGM batteries or some lithium batteries, feeding into capacitors. And then those capacitors, and I'm not talking about the little 1 farad, 2 farad caps, plus super capacitors. Feeding into a bank of capacitors, that's feeding your amplifiers. Therefore, the amplifiers can pull that instant power quick as they want, bam, and not have to worry about trying to pull all this instant power out of these AGMs or out of the alternator. They can pull that power out of those capacitors, get that instant response that they want, that thunderous bass. If the bass note continues for a little bit, the battery starts pushing in there and kind of feeding it in, all softening the blow. And as that voltage drops on that system, the alternator is feeding it back in, building it back up. That 3-piece scenario ultimately is going to give you the best results. As far as how many batteries you could take out if you're putting capacitors in, I don't know. When you go to lithium, the battery sizes are going to change. All of these figures are going to change when you run lithium or when you run capacitors. But if you're just going to run AGMs, I recommend, again, 100 amp hour battery for every 1,000 watts. And there's always the half of that, 50 amps for every 1,000 watts coming out of the alternator. So depending on how big you go, you just multiply and divide to get to that point. I hope this was helpful, guys. If it was, be sure to hit the subscribe button. And be sure to head on over to Carmel Car Audio, their YouTube page. I'll have a link below, and give them a subscription. And also head over to GP Car Audio and check out their availability of all of their stuff, because they've got the batteries, the alternators, the brackets, the wires, the distribution blocks, the fuses, all the stuff to make what we're talking about, all of the stuff to make that stuff happen. If you're looking for all that equipment to get the big boy power going, GP Car Audio is where you want to go. Anyway, guys, peace.